I didn't pack much. Just a suitcase with one broken wheel, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 soft shirts, 1 oversized sweater that still smelled faintly of lavender and old memories, my journal, a pen that worked when it wanted to, and an old photograph of my mother, smiling at the beach, her hair caught in the wind, frozen in a moment before life started stealing pieces of her. I didn't leave a grand message, no dramatic email, no long voice memo, just a yellow sticky note on the kitchen table. Don't look for me, I'll be okay. I didn't tell my son, I didn't tell my friends, I didn't even tell myself what I was doing, but I left. I locked the door to my apartment, dropped the key into the mailbox, and walked away without looking back. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. The apartment I left behind wasn't special. Beige walls, a cracked window that never closed all the way, a sink that always dripped. It was filled with the kind of silence that had weight to it, the kind that felt like something had died there, but no one dared to say what. My marriage had ended there. Not in a loud, cinematic way, no shattered plates or slammed doors. Just a slow, creeping absence. 2 people quietly disappearing from each other while sitting in the same room. We used to share everything. Then we shared nothing. Then we shared the silence. Then we shared the goodbye. People talk about starting over like it's brave, like it's noble. But truthfully, it felt like failure. Like I had tried so hard for so long to hold everything together, my family, my work, my identity, and then one day my hands just let go. Not because I wanted to, but because they were too tired. I disappeared because I no longer recognized the woman I had become. Not because she was bad, but because she was empty, hollowed out by years of saying I'm fine when I wasn't, smiling when I wanted to scream, nodding when I wanted to run. I had become a ghost in my own life. And no one noticed. Not even me. I took a bus going nowhere in particular. 3 towns over. No plan, no destination, just a cheap motel with flickering neon and a room that smelled like bleach and old cigarette smoke. But it had a lock, a bed, and no one who knew my name. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to silence that wasn't mine. My phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. I turned it off instead. And in that moment, the quiet, the blankness, the not checking, the being nowhere, I felt something unfamiliar. Not peace. Not sadness. Not even freedom. Just space. Empty space where my name used to echo. And strangely, that emptiness didn't scare me. It felt like the first honest breath I had taken in years. I didn't run away. I disappeared slowly, quietly, so I could finally learn how to come back. But not yet. First, I needed to be forgotten, so I could remember myself. The motel had no soul. Fluorescent lights buzzed all night. The curtains were too thin to block the street lamp that blinked like it had a secret. The bed sheets were clean, but not warm. The TV whispered static even when turned off. It was perfect, because it matched the inside of me. On the second day, I opened my suitcase and realized I had forgotten to pack underwear. I laughed not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. 39 years old, 2 degrees, a mother, a former wife, and yet here I was, standing barefoot on a motel carpet that smelled like sadness, realizing I didn't know how to take care of myself without a to-do list. I had always taken care of someone. My husband, my son, my team at work, my aging mother. But no one had ever taught me how to take care of me. Not the version of me that wasn't needed. Not the version of me that was just me. The apartment I had left was still technically mine. I paid for 2 more months up front before leaving. I think a part of me wanted to leave a door open just in case I failed at disappearing. I returned there once, quietly, 3 weeks after I left. I didn't tell anyone. I went in the middle of the day, when no one would be home to ask questions. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. Half a bottle of soy sauce on the counter. A basket of laundry still waiting to be folded. A photo of my son on the fridge, smiling with cake on his nose, age 5. A dried plant in the window I had promised to water and hadn't. I stood there, surrounded by the echoes of my own life. And it hit me. I had lived here every day and never truly been present. I had slept in that bed, eaten at that table, cried in that shower, but I had never allowed myself to exist there. I had performed a life. Now I was finally living. I didn't stay long. I grabbed an old sweater I missed, a box of books, and a photo album tucked behind a drawer. I didn't touch the framed picture of my wedding day. I didn't read the sticky notes my son had left me on the fridge over the years. I couldn't yet. Some wounds aren't ready for closure. Some memories need silence before they can become soft. Back at the motel, I placed the photo album on the nightstand. Not to look at it, just so it could be near me. It felt like having a part of my old life sit quietly beside the new one, like two strangers sharing a bench, not speaking, just existing near each other. Sometimes that's all you can do. You don't reconcile with your past in one night. You let it follow you like a shadow in hope. One day, it stops feeling like a ghost. That night, I didn't cry. But I did something braver. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I went back." And I didn't break. That has to mean something. And for the first time in weeks, I believed myself. 3 days after I returned to the motel, I ran out of food. I'd been surviving on instant noodles, motel coffee, and a questionable vending machine sandwich that tasted like cardboard and regret. So I made a list, not because I needed one, but because making a list made me feel capable. I borrowed a bike from the front desk guy. He didn't ask questions, just nodded and handed me the key like he'd seen 100 women before me doing the exact same thing. I went to the nearest grocery store, a small town chain with flickering lights, bad jazz, and the faint smell of cleaning fluid trying to cover something older. It was aisle 3 that did it. Not the whole aisle, just one shelf. Peanut butter. Crunchy, to be exact. I reached out for it instinctively before my hand froze mid-air. Crunchy peanut butter had always been my husband's favorite. I used to tease him for it, said it was for people who couldn't commit to being smooth. He'd laugh, kiss my forehead, and buy 2 jars just to be petty. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. Right there, between the canned beans and the off-brand cereal, my knees went soft. It wasn't just the peanut butter. It was everything. It was the way the lights hummed above my head, the way the cartwheels squeaked as a child passed behind me, the way I hadn't said my son's name out loud in over a month. It was the quiet kind of grief, the one that builds, layer by invisible layer, until one small, stupid thing cracks it open. And peanut butter broke me. I held onto the shelf, pretending to read ingredients while tears blurred my vision. Nobody noticed. Or maybe they did and chose not to. I wanted someone to ask, "Are you okay?" But I also didn't. Because what would I have said? "Yes, I'm fine. I'm just grieving a marriage I chose to leave, a version of myself I barely liked, and the silence I thought I needed but now can't escape." Instead, I wiped my face with my sleeve, picked the smooth jar because maybe it was time to stop pretending to like what I didn't, and kept walking. At the checkout, the teenage cashier smiled without looking up. I paid in cash. He handed me my change and said, "Have a nice day." And I almost whispered, "You too." But it caught in my throat, because I wasn't sure what a nice day even looked like anymore. Back at the motel, I didn't eat. I sat on the bed, holding the jar of peanut butter in my hands like it was something holy, and I whispered, "I miss the parts of my life that didn't hurt." It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a breakdown. It was just the truth. Sometimes healing doesn't start with big declarations. Sometimes it starts in aisle 3, holding something that used to mean nothing and now means everything. That night, I cried. Really cried. Not the tidy kind, not the silent tears, the shaking, gasping, pillow-clutching kind, the kind that empties you out and then gives you back your breath. And afterward, I wrote in my journal, "Today, I felt something. That's how I know I'm not gone. Not completely. I didn't make an announcement. No goodbye post. No taking a break from social media caption. No dramatic unfollow spree. I just deleted everything. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, even Pinterest, though that one hurt more than I expected. It started as a small decision, a thought that whispered at 2 a.m. when the silence of the motel room got too loud. Who are you performing for now? It was a simple question, and it cracked something open. I used to be the kind of woman who curated her life like a magazine spread. Filtered sunsets, family selfies, captions that made pain sound poetic, like healing isn't linear, while I cried on the bathroom floor 10 minutes before posting it. I posted my job promotions, my son's honor roll, my smiling anniversary dinner 2 weeks before my husband told me he didn't love me anymore. Likes were a strange kind of currency. Every heart, every comment, every share, it all whispered, "You're doing okay. Look, they still care." But they didn't know me. Not really. They knew the me I edited, softened, filtered, palatable. The woman who knew the right angles, the right quotes, the right level of vulnerability to seem honest without being messy. But healing is messy. It's not aesthetic. It doesn't fit in a square frame or a caption limit. It looks like sleeping in until 2 p.m. because your body is too heavy to move. It looks like cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row. It looks like crying over peanut butter in aisle 3. And it looks like logging out permanently, not because you're hiding, but because you're finally done pretending. When I deleted my accounts, I expected to feel lighter. Instead, I felt invisible. There was no digital mirror left to reflect me back to myself. No one to validate my pain with a heart emoji. No algorithm to remind me of who I had been 5 years ago. And that emptiness? It terrified me. But also, it was honest. You don't realize how loud the world is until you turn it off. Without notifications, I sat with silence. Without an audience, I stopped performing. Without a timeline to scroll, I started remembering my own. I remembered how I used to love handwritten letters. How I once dreamed of living in a cabin with books and tea and no internet. How I used to sit in libraries for hours just to feel surrounded by quiet things. I remembered me. Not the me that posted for likes. The one that existed before the world started watching. I didn't delete everything to be dramatic. I deleted it so I could survive. so I could look in the mirror and not see a profile picture, but a person. So I could cry without wondering if I should turn it into a story. So I could laugh without reaching for my phone. So I could be real, even if no one else saw it. And now, when people ask where I went, if they ever ask, I'll just say, I went to find the version of me that didn't need to be seen to feel alive. And if they don't understand, that's okay. She does. I bought a pack of envelopes, even though I didn't plan to mail anything. White, plain, cheap paper that tore easily if you pulled too hard. It felt right. Some truths aren't meant to be delivered. They're meant to be released. The first letter was to my son. I stared at the blank page for a long time before writing his name at the top. Seeing it in my handwriting made my chest ache in a way I wasn't prepared for. I wrote slowly. I don't know how to explain why I left without saying goodbye. I know that makes me a coward. Or maybe it makes me human. I'm still trying to figure that out. I told him I missed the way he used to fall asleep on the couch with his socks half off. I told him I still kept the mug he made me in second grade, even though the handle was cracked and it leaked if you weren't careful. I didn't tell him I was scared he'd hate me. I didn't tell him I was afraid he'd grow up thinking abandonment was normal. I stopped writing when my hands started shaking. Some apologies are too heavy to finish in one sitting. I folded the letter anyway, slipped it into an envelope, didn't seal it. The second letter was to my ex-husband. That one came easier. Too easy. You weren't cruel. You just stopped choosing me. And I stayed long after I felt myself disappearing because I thought love meant endurance. I wrote about the nights we ate dinner in silence. The mornings we woke up facing opposite walls. The way he said my name less and less, like it no longer belonged to me. I admitted my own failures. The resentment I swallowed until it turned me bitter. The times I wanted him to notice me instead of asking. But the hardest sentence was the simplest. I loved you, and that should have been enough for both of us. I didn't cry after that letter. I felt empty and strangely relieved. The third letter was to my mother. That one broke me. She was still alive, but not fully present anymore. Illness had blurred her memories, softened her sharpness, taken pieces of her language. I wrote anyway. I needed you more than you knew. And I forgive you for the ways you didn't know how to stay. I told her I was tired of being strong, tired of being the one who held everything together, tired of pretending I didn't need comfort too. I wrote until the page was soaked. Then I stopped. Some forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from waiting for an apology that will never come. The last letter took me days to start. It was addressed to myself. No name, just you. I didn't know what to say at first. I'd spent so long criticizing myself that kindness felt unfamiliar. Eventually, the words came. You did not fail at life. You survived a version of it that asked too much and gave too little. You stayed longer than you should have, because you believed love meant sacrifice. You left because staying was killing you. I wrote about the exhaustion, the guilt, the shame of not being grateful enough, the fear of starting over at an age when people expect you to have it all figured out. And then, one sentence appeared on the page that I hadn't planned. I'm proud of you for choosing to stay alive. I sat with that sentence for a long time, because no one had ever said it to me before. I didn't send any of the letters. I stacked them neatly, tied them with a piece of string, placed them in the bottom drawer of the motel nightstand, not as evidence of pain, but as proof of honesty. Writing those letters didn't fix anything. My life didn't suddenly make sense. My grief didn't disappear. My future was still uncertain and frighteningly blank. But something shifted. I had stopped running from my own voice. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something real. I didn't mean to go to the park. I was just tired of staring at the motel ceiling. The walls felt like they were leaning in lately, listening too closely, holding too much of my silence. So I walked. It was cold, not painfully so, but the kind of cold that reminds you still have skin. I had no destination. I followed a sidewalk, then a pigeon, then the sound of wind through bare trees. That's how I ended up in a small city park with peeling benches and a rusted swing set that creaked even when no one was on it. I sat down because there was nowhere else to go. Because movement had become a substitute for purpose. Because stillness felt like surrender. She was already there. I hadn't noticed her at first, a small, folded figure on the other end of the bench. Wrapped in a wool coat that looked older than me, she held a paper bag in her lap like it contained secrets instead of breadcrumbs. We sat in silence for maybe 10 minutes. Then she spoke, eyes still forward. "You walked here like someone who needed to be seen but didn't want to talk." I turned, startled. She smiled without looking at me. "I've been that woman. I still am, some days." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She reached into her bag and scattered crumbs for the birds that weren't there. "You're not from around here," she said. I shook my head. "Just passing through." "Aren't we all?" she murmured, almost to herself. Her voice was scratchy, like gravel and honey. Not sweet, but soothing, in the way old songs are the kind that remind you of something you never lived but still miss. I finally asked, "Do you come here often?" She chuckled. "Every day. This bench knows more about me than my children do." There was no bitterness in her tone, just fact. "Sometimes," she continued, "I talk to the birds like they're old friends. Other times, I sit here and remember the parts of me that nobody else does." I looked at her, then really looked. Lines carved by time, eyes that had seen too much but still looked outward, hands folded neatly like they were used to holding things that could break. She turned to me. "You look like someone who's trying not to fall apart." I blinked too fast. Laughed too soft. "Maybe I already did," I said. "Good," she replied. "Now you can stop trying so hard to keep it all together." I don't know why her words hit me like they did. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was her voice, matter of fact, without pity. Maybe it was because no one had said something so honest to me in so long. She adjusted her scarf and said, "There's a strange kind of freedom that comes when you realize no one's coming to save you. You stop waiting, and you start walking." "But where to?" I asked. "Doesn't matter," she smiled. "Forward is enough." We sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Not awkward. Just shared. She stood up slowly, joints protesting, and dusted off crumbs from her coat. "You don't need to heal all at once," she said, like she was finishing a thought I hadn't spoken. "Just don't let the silence convince you you're alone." She walked away with the careful grace of someone who had learned the hard way not to rush through anything. I never asked her name. I never saw her again. But that night, I wrote in my journal, "A woman at the park told me I don't have to hold it all together. Maybe falling apart is just how we make space for what's next." And somehow, I started to believe that healing didn't mean going back to who I was. It meant learning how to sit on a cold bench with a stranger and feel seen anyway. It started with eggs. Not a full meal, not a fancy recipe. Just 2 eggs scrambled, a little too dry but warm. I hadn't cooked anything real in weeks. The motel microwave had become both my kitchen and excuse. What's the point? I used to think. Who's going to see it? But that morning, I woke up hungry. Not just for food, but for something real. Something hot, simple, and made with care. So I bought a small pan from the dollar store, a half-dozen eggs, salt, pepper, and a loaf of bread that reminded me of my childhood kitchen plain. Soft, no seeds, no guilt. Back at the motel, I used the tiny hot plate near the sink. The pan wobbled, the eggs stuck. The bread burned slightly because I forgot to flip it. But when I sat down, plate in hand, something shifted. There was no one to cook for, no one to impress, no phone to take pictures with. Just me, just food, just this moment. I sat cross-legged on the motel bed and took a bite. And I cried. Not because it was bad, because it tasted human, because it reminded me that I still existed, that my body still needed things, that I hadn't vanished completely just because no one else could see me anymore. Eating alone is its own kind of grief. You start to notice how loud silence is, how strange it is to chew without conversation, how easy it is to forget your own hunger when no one else is watching. For years I'd made dinner for others. My husband liked his pasta firm, not soft. My son hated green things unless they were candy. Dinner had always been performance nourishing others while skipping my own plate half the time. Now, I had to ask myself questions I hadn't in years. What do I like to eat? What makes me feel full, not just fed? Can I enjoy my own company for the length of a meal? The first few days, the answer was no. I rushed through bites, kept the TV on as background noise, ate standing up, but slowly it changed. I began setting the table. Well, my version of a table, a folded towel over the desk with a spoon, a fork, and a glass of motel tap water. I lit a candle one night just to see what it felt like. It felt ridiculous. Then it felt beautiful. One evening, I made soup. From scratch. Chopped onions, carrots, garlic. The smell filled the tiny room and clung to my clothes. I sat down with that bowl of soup like it was a gift, and, in a way, it was. I took the first spoonful, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself, "You deserve this." And I believed it. It's strange how quiet self-worth is. It doesn't arrive with applause or confetti. It comes in soft rituals like making soup for yourself, lighting a candle just because, or refusing to eat from a takeout box when you could use a real plate. I still eat alone. But now it doesn't feel like I've been left behind. It feels like I'm keeping myself company. And maybe that's enough. Maybe learning to eat alone is really about learning to be with yourself, fully, without apology, without needing a reason to make the meal matter. That night, in my journal, I wrote, "I fed myself today. Not just my body, but the part of me that forgot I was worth cooking for, and that somehow felt like love." For 32 days, I kept the curtains closed. It wasn't about privacy. It wasn't about hiding. It was about control. The darkness was predictable. It didn't ask anything of me. It didn't expose me. In the absence of sunlight, I didn't have to see the dust on the floor, the mirror spots I avoided, the fact that I had been wearing the same sweater for 4 days straight. I could exist in shadow quietly, unjudged, untouched, safe? Or so I thought. On day 33, I woke up to a breeze. It snuck in through the cracks around the window, gentle but persistent. The room was cold, not unkindly so, just enough to make me pull the blanket tighter and notice that I was still, in fact, breathing. Still here. I stared at the window. The curtains were faded beige, nothing special, the kind that motels don't replace until they have to. But there was a sliver, a thin, glowing line of light bleeding through the center, right where the fabric didn't quite meet. It was almost nothing, but it was enough. Enough to make me whisper, out loud. Maybe just a little. I stood up barefoot, walked to the window, and pulled the curtains apart. The light didn't flood in like a movie scene. There was no divine moment, no music swelling in the background. But still the room changed. Not completely. Not suddenly. But honestly, the dust danced in the air like quiet confessions. The chipped paint on the windowsill became a story instead of a flaw. And my reflection, faint in the glass, looked human. Tired, but real. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't look away. The sunlight wasn't warm. It wasn't soft. It wasn't some metaphorical beam of salvation. It was just light. And that was enough. Because I had forgotten what it looked like. I had forgotten what I looked like in it. I sat on the edge of the bed, in that strip of sun, and let it touch my skin. My arms, my legs, my face. And I waited for the shame to come, the voice that says, "You don't deserve this. Get up. Do something useful." But it didn't come. There was only silence. And light. I made tea, not because I wanted tea, but because I wanted to hold something warm in my hands while sitting in the sun. It felt like a ritual, like something ancient and sacred, a woman choosing herself in the simplest of ways. I drank it slowly, breathed deeply, did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it was enough. I didn't pull the curtains shut after that. Not completely. Some days I let just a little light in. Some days, more. But I never went back to full darkness. Because that room, that tiny motel room, had seen me buried. Now it could witness me rise. Even if just a little. That night, in my journal, I wrote, "The world didn't change today. I did. I opened the curtains. And it was the bravest thing I had done in a long, long time. I thought coming back would feel like failure. Like walking back into a room I had stormed out of, head down, apology ready. But it didn't feel like that. Because I wasn't returning to anything. Not really. Not the life I had left behind. Not the roles I had abandoned. Not the identity I had once clung to. I was returning to myself. And that return, it wasn't loud. There was no grand announcement. No social media post. No dramatic text saying, "I'm back." I simply started living again. Small things. First, I walked to the cafe down the street and ordered tea for here, not to go. I sat by the window and read a paperback novel I'd found in the motel's lost and found bin. No one stared. No one asked why I looked like someone who had been away from people for too long. I began replying to emails. Not all, just the kind ones. I didn't explain my absence. I didn't promise anything. I let silence remain where explanations used to live. I stopped deleting voicemails. Most were from my sister, short, rambling ones filled with everyday things. Groceries, her dog, the weather. but one message I listened to twice. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're okay, but I hope you're choosing something better than pretending you're fine. I didn't call her back, not yet. But I smiled and whispered, I am. Returning isn't about being ready. It's about not needing to hide anymore. It's the moment you walk outside without checking your reflection first. The moment you make a decision without asking for permission. The moment you realize you don't owe anyone a performance, only your presence. I started using my real name again when ordering coffee. That felt bigger than it sounds. Because for months, I'd been living like a ghost. A blur. A woman-shaped shadow with no edges. Saying my name was an act of reclamation. Of roots. Of self. One afternoon, I passed by a mirror in a bookstore. I almost kept walking. But something in me, the part that had been quiet for so long, said, "Look." So I did. And I saw a woman who had been through something. You could tell. The eyes were softer. The mouth didn't hold as much tension. The shoulders, once tight from holding the world, now hung a little lower, not from defeat, but release. She didn't look triumphant. She looked true. And I nodded at her. Like we had an agreement now. That night, in my journal, I wrote, I came back, not as who I was, but as someone who knows better what she can carry and what she no longer has to. The world didn't clap. There was no welcome party. No one said, "We missed you." And that was okay, because this return wasn't for them. It was for me. People ask about healing like it's a destination. Are you better now? Did the time away help? Are you happy again? But I don't know how to answer. Because I didn't wake up one day glowing. I didn't become enlightened. There's no scar I can point to and say, here's where I healed. I still flinch at certain songs. Still skip over his name when scrolling. Still dream, sometimes, of a home I'll never return to. But I don't run from those things anymore. I let them sit beside me, quietly, like guests who overstayed their welcome but no longer have power. So no, I didn't heal, but I did something else. I remembered how to love. Not romance, not fireworks, not the kind that needs to be returned. I remembered how to love a quiet morning the way sunlight touches the edge of a coffee cup. How to love the sound of my own footsteps, unhurried, purposeful. How to love the softness in my voice when I say no without guilt. I remembered how to love a day with nothing planned and not feel like I was wasting time. How to love the way my hands look when they're not holding anything but still feel full. How to love my body, not because it's perfect, but because it's mine and it stayed. Love isn't loud anymore. It used to be desperation. Now, it's presence. It used to be sacrifice. Now, it's permission. I still carry grief. Some mornings, it clings to me like a second skin. Some nights, I whisper old names into the dark, wondering if they remember me too. But I've stopped trying to cut it out. Now, I just make space for it right next to joy. They sit together sometimes, and that's okay. People want neat endings. They want to know that the broken woman put herself back together. That she found love again. That she came home. Here's the truth. I am the home now. And I no longer need to be whole to be worthy of love. This isn't a story of healing. It's a story of remembering. Remembering how to rest. How to stay. How to feel. How to love the one person I spent my whole life abandoning. Me. And so, I live. Not louder, not braver, just truer. I light candles for no reason. I write letters I don't send. I smile at strangers who might never smile back. And sometimes, only sometimes, I catch myself laughing. Really laughing. The kind that starts in your chest and surprises your face. And in those moments, I know I didn't heal, but I found something better. I remembered how to love, even in the dark. Especially in the dark. And that is enough.